Act 5, the body bag. The helicopter landed at the base. Medics rushed to help. They looked at Roy, saw the wounds, the amount of blood, the condition of his body. One medic checked for a pulse. Could not find one. He is dead, the medic said. They put Roy Benavidez in a body bag, zipped it up, prepared to transport him to the morgue. But Roy was not dead. He was conscious, aware, trapped inside a body bag, unable to move, unable to speak. His jaw was shattered. His body was broken. And then Roy did something that would become legendary. A doctor was about to tag the body bag when he leaned down to do a final check. Roy gathered every bit of strength he had left, worked up saliva in his ruined mouth, and spit in the doctor's face. The doctor jumped back. He is alive. Get him to surgery. Now! Roy had just proven he was alive by spitting on a doctor. It is the most Roy Benavidez thing possible. ACT 6. The recovery Roy spent almost a year in hospitals. Multiple surgeries. Months of rehabilitation, physical therapy. Learning to walk again. Learning to use his arms again. The doctors said it was a miracle he survived. The amount of damage to his body should have been fatal. The blood loss alone should have killed him, but Roy had survived worse. Survived poverty. Survived a landmine. Survived paralysis. Surviving 37 wounds was just another challenge. But here is what happened next that shows you who Roy Benavidez really was. The Army recommended Roy for the Medal of Honor, the highest military decoration. But the recommendation was denied. Why? Because there were no official witnesses who had survived to verify his actions. The 12 men Roy had saved were unconscious or severely wounded during the extraction. They could not provide detailed accounts. The helicopter crew could only describe what they saw from the air. Without witness statements, the Medal of Honor was denied. Roy received the Distinguished Service Cross instead, the second highest award. Roy did not complain. "I did not do it for medals," he said. "I did it because those were my brothers." For 13 years, Roy carried on with his life. The story seemed closed. But then, in 1980, one of the men Roy had saved that day, a soldier named Brian O'Connor, came forward with a detailed written statement of everything Roy had done. O'Connor had been severely wounded during the battle. But he had been conscious. He had seen everything Roy did, every act of courage, every moment of heroism. O'Connor's statement was the official witness testimony the Army needed. Act 7, the Medal of Honor, February 24, 1981. The White House. President Ronald Reagan presented Roy Benavidez with the Medal of Honor. Roy was 45 years old. 13 years after the battle that should have killed him, Reagan read the citation. It took several minutes. The list of Roy's actions that day was extraordinary. When Reagan finished, he looked at Roy and said, "If the story of your life were a movie script, Hollywood would not believe it. They would say it was too unrealistic." Roy smiled. "Mr. President, Hollywood could not handle my life." Rehook their 7. But Roy did not rest on his laurels. He spent the next 17 years traveling across America. Roy visited schools, talked to students, especially Hispanic and Latino students who faced discrimination and poverty like he had. His message was simple. Your circumstances do not define you. I was an orphan. I picked cotton. I had no education. I was paralyzed. And I became a Green Beret and Medal of Honor recipient. If I can do it, you can do it. Roy spoke to thousands of students. He received hundreds of letters from young people telling him he had inspired them to finish school, join the military, pursue their dreams. Roy never charged speaking fees. He did it for free. "If I can help one kid believe in themselves," he said, "then it is worth it." Act 8. The Legacy, November 29, 1998. Roy Benavidez died from complications related to diabetes. He was 63 years old. His funeral was attended by hundreds of people, veterans, students he had inspired, politicians, military leaders, one of the 12 men Roy had saved spoke at the funeral. "Roy saved my life twice. Once in Vietnam when he pulled me out of that jungle. And once after the war, when I was struggling with PTSD and suicidal thoughts, Roy called me, told me I survived for a reason, told me to keep living. I am here today because of Roy Benavidez. Today, Roy Benavidez is remembered not just for his 6 hours of combat heroism, but for his entire life of refusing to quit. He refused to let poverty define him. He refused to let discrimination stop him. He refused to accept paralysis. He refused to leave his brothers behind. He refused to die in a body bag. He refused to let young people give up on themselves. Roy Benavidez proved that your circumstances do not define your destiny. Your choices do. There is a statue of Roy at Fort Sam Houston in Texas. It shows him not in his Medal of Honor ceremony, but as he was on May 2, 1968, wounded, bloodied, but still standing, still fighting. The inscription reads, "Hero, Patriot, Warrior." But Roy would have added one more word, survivor, because that is what Roy Benavidez was above all else. A survivor who refused to quit, who proved that the human spirit is stronger than any wound. That determination can overcome any obstacle in wounds. 6 hours, 12 lives saved, and one man who showed us that heroes are not born. They are forged through adversity, hardened by challenge, and defined by the choice to never give up. Rest in peace, Roy Benavidez. You earned it. Want more stories of impossible survival? Watch Audie Murphy or Desmond Doss next. Or explore the complete Legendary Warriors series. May 2, 1968, Vietnam. A Green Beret jumped from a helicopter into enemy fire to save 12 men. Over the next 6 hours, he was shot 7 times, hit by grenade shrapnel 30 times, stabbed with a bayonet, and clubbed unconscious. When medics put him in a body bag, he spit in the doctor's face to prove he was alive. This is Roy Benavidez, the man who refused to die. Act 1. The Boy Who Had Nothing, August 5, 1935. Cuero, Texas. Roy Benavidez was born into poverty that most people cannot imagine. His parents were Mexican-American farm workers. They had nothing, less than nothing. When Roy was 7 years old, his father died from tuberculosis. When Roy was 8, his mother died from the same disease. Roy and his brother were orphaned. They went to live with their aunt and uncle. The family worked in the cotton fields of Texas, backbreaking labor. Endless heat. Poverty that never went away. Roy picked cotton from age 8. He dropped out of school after 7th grade because the family needed him to work full-time. He could barely read, could barely write, had no education, no prospects, no future. White Americans in Texas treated Mexican Americans like Roy as second-class citizens. Discrimination was everywhere. Jobs were limited. Opportunities were few. Roy seemed destined for a life of poverty and hard labor. But Roy had something that could not be taken away: determination. Because Roy Benavidez refused to accept that his circumstances defined his future. At age 19, in 1955, Roy did something that changed his life. He joined the U.S. Army. The Army gave him something he had never had: opportunity. A paycheck, training, purpose, respect. Roy excelled. He was tough, disciplined, fearless. The hard labor of his childhood had made him physically strong. The discrimination he had faced made him mentally tough. But Roy wanted more than being a regular soldier. He wanted to be Special Forces. He wanted to be a Green Beret. In 1965, Roy was deployed to Vietnam as an advisor. During a patrol, he stepped on a landmine. The explosion shattered his back. Doctors told him he would never walk again. Roy was paralyzed from the waist down. At age 29, his military career seemed over. Most people would have accepted this, would have taken the medical discharge, would have spent the rest of their lives in a wheelchair. Roy Benavidez refused. Act 2. The impossible recovery. The doctors were clear. Roy's back injuries were too severe. The nerve damage was permanent. He would never walk again. Roy heard this, then ignored it completely. At night, when the hospital staff went home, Roy would drag himself out of bed. Using only his arms, he would pull himself across the floor, inch by inch, his legs useless behind him. It was agony. But Roy did it every night. The hospital staff found him one morning on the floor, unconscious from pain and exhaustion. They put him back in bed, told him to stop hurting himself. Roy waited until they left, then did it again the next night. Months of this, dragging himself across floors, trying to make his legs work through pure willpower, and then, impossibly, his legs began to respond. Small movements at first. A twitch, a flex. Gradual feeling returning. The doctors could not explain it. The nerve damage should have been permanent. But Roy's refusal to accept paralysis, combined with months of brutal self-rehabilitation, had somehow worked. Within a year, Roy was walking. With a cane at first, then without. Within 2 years, Roy was running. The army doctors were stunned. They cleared him for active duty. Roy immediately volunteered to return to Vietnam. He wanted to join the Special Forces. He wanted to be a Green Beret. In 1968, Roy completed Green Beret training. He was assigned to MAC VSOG, Studies and Observations Group, one of the most elite and dangerous units in Vietnam. Roy was 32 years old. He had survived poverty, survived discrimination, survived a landmine, survived paralysis. He was about to face something that would test him beyond anything he had experienced before. C3 May 2, 1968. The Call May 2, 1968. Loc Ninh, Vietnam. Near the Cambodian border. Roy was at the forward operating base when he heard it. Radio chatter. Panicked voices. A 12-man Special Forces reconnaissance team was pinned down by a North Vietnamese army force of approximately 1,000 soldiers. The team was surrounded, taking heavy casualties, running out of ammunition. Helicopters could not land because of heavy enemy fire. The team was going to be overrun. All 12 men would be killed or captured. Someone had to go in and extract them. Roy heard the radio traffic. He was not assigned to that team. He was not on duty. He could have stayed at the base where it was safe. Instead, Roy grabbed his medical bag, his weapon, and ran to the helicopter pad. "I am going in," he told the helicopter pilot. "Benavidez, you are not assigned to this mission. Those are my brothers out there. I am going." What Roy Benavidez did over the next 6 hours would become the most extraordinary act of courage in the Vietnam War. The helicopter approached the landing zone. Roy could see it was a nightmare. The reconnaissance team was surrounded in a small clearing. Bodies were visible on the ground. Gunfire was continuous. North Vietnamese soldiers were everywhere. The helicopter could not land. Too much enemy fire. The pilot was preparing to pull back. Roy did not wait. He jumped from the helicopter while it was still 10 feet in the air. He hit the ground running, toward the surrounded team. Through a hailstorm of bullets, he was immediately shot. Bullet hit his leg. He kept running, shot again. Bullet hit his other leg. He kept running, shot a third time. Bullet grazed his head. He kept running. Roy reached the first wounded soldier. The man was unconscious, bleeding out. Roy began treating him while under fire. A grenade exploded near Roy. Shrapnel tore through his back and arms. He kept working. He dragged the wounded soldier toward the helicopter landing zone. Came back for the next one, and the next one. Roy was coordinating the team, treating wounded, returning fire at the enemy, calling in airstrikes, doing the work of 5 men, another grenade, more shrapnel in his face and arms. Roy kept moving. ACT-4, the 6 hours of hell over. The next 6 hours, Roy Benavidez did something that seems physically impossible. He was shot 7 times total. Bullets hit both legs, both arms, his head, his back, his abdomen. He took shrapnel from approximately 30 grenade explosions. He had his jaw broken by enemy gunfire, but he kept fighting. Roy carried wounded men to the helicopter, one by one, while being shot, while bleeding from multiple wounds. Every time he thought he had everyone, he would discover another wounded soldier. He would go back, again and again, but the worst was yet to come. After hours of fighting, a helicopter finally managed to land. Roy had loaded 8 wounded men onto it. He went back for the last 4. As he was dragging a wounded soldier toward the helicopter, he was hit by a North Vietnamese soldier wielding a rifle with a bayonet. The enemy soldier stabbed Roy in the back with the bayonet. The blade went deep. Roy felt the steel pierce his body, felt his strength draining, but Roy Benavidez did not fall. He spun around, grabbed the rifle, pulled the enemy soldier toward him, and killed him in hand-to-hand combat with a bayonet still in his back. Roy pulled the bayonet out himself, continued dragging the wounded soldier to the helicopter. He loaded the last wounded men onto the helicopter. Counted heads, 12 men, everyone accounted for. Then Roy collapsed. He tried to stand. Could not. His legs would not work. Too much blood loss. Too much damage. He crawled to the helicopter. Other soldiers pulled him aboard. The helicopter lifted off. Roy lay on the floor, bleeding from 37 wounds. He had been in combat for 6 hours, had saved 12 men, had refused to leave anyone behind, and now, finally, his body was shutting down.